Hello, welcome back to Sunday. When I was a little kid, my mom worked. My mom was a seamstress, and or she was back in England. It's one of the things she learned how to do, and so she came over to America, and so when I was little, she worked at a dry cleaners. Like there was a chain of dry cleaners, and so they would take in alterations and then give it to mom. Mom worked from home, and then she would do basic things like replace zippers and hem pants and dresses and all that good stuff, to take things in, make them look better. And so while she was doing all that, a lot of times I would read to her. And so we liked the James Herriot books. I don't know if most of you guys probably don't know them. They're an English author. It's a vet from kind of around back before we had like antibiotics and stuff, and it's him joining a practice and growing up and getting married, and every little story revolves around saving a sheep or a cow or something, right? But anyway, they were long enough and they were fun, and so as I was reading them, I would get excited and I would get faster and faster and faster on my reading, and Mom would be like, slow down, start over. Because she was trying to appreciate the story too. And so I guess last week kind of reminded me of that, because a lot of you were like, I think you meant John and you said Jason, or you meant Jason, you said John. And yeah, so anyway, so this week I'll try and do a much better job for you all. Okay, all right, so anyway, so last week, obviously, we finished up. We discovered what Annabeth's big secret was, and as a Sonic mage, she's doing like the karate, but she's being very creative with it, and so she's using it for movement, she's using it for power, she's using it, in a variety of different ways, and it's obviously working very well and focusing her magic to go with her physicality, and that's how come she's had such a large jump in her arena levels and punching levels and things like that. So anyway, so I'm just going to read the last little bit of chapter 35 and then jump into chapter 36. Sandy and John started talking strategy, and both of them seemed excited and anxious to get into the arena. Tyler said it was a lot harder than it looked, and he suggested they start at level 1 and work their way up. They didn't disagree with him, but they both thought they had plenty of experience and were ready to jump right in. Would you like to try the scenario that Annabeth just completed? Tyler suggested with a sly grin. I have to warn you, it's much harder than it appears from up here. Sandy and John looked at each other, a whole conversation happening in just a glance. I would like to try, Sandy declared. I would too, John chimed in. I'm sure the house will let us modify the rules just this once, Tyler said. Then he flashed a mischievous grin. I think you both are going to get your asses handed to you. So would you care to make this more interesting? So that is the end of chapter 35. And now we are on to chapter 36, Three Spears. What did you have in mind? John flashed a mischievous grin right back. If you fail your match, you will make me a ring of my choosing, Tyler replied. John nodded. You know I'd make you a ring anyway, so that's not much of a wager. But if I win, you'll give me a nice foot rub and trim my toenails. And you'll use a nice smelling lotion too. I like floral scents, by the way. Tyler flexed his fingers at John and laughed. It's a bet. Now, Sandy, what do you want to wager? Sandy looked thoughtful. I'd like to meet Mr. Tubbles, she said. I haven't met him yet, and you know I love the kitties. I know you do, Tyler smiled. He's a bit aloof, so I can't guarantee he'll be happy to see you, but I can certainly do an introduction. Now, if I win, I'd like to be with you when you make your next charm and see what I can sense with my mark of the deep earth. Of course, Sandy exclaimed. Are you interested in making charms? I had no idea. After hearing Jason talk about it, I feel inspired to give it a try. I think it's fascinating what the centaurs did with the glass, and it makes me wonder what I could create. Even if I couldn't make a hold charm, I'd like to try making a rune and seeing what I could do with it. Well, that was certainly interesting. I had ideas I wanted to try out, and it sounded like Tyler would be the perfect person to work with on some of them. All the wagers were pretty low-key, but they did add an extra bit of spice to their upcoming matches. Goggles was right. A bet added some flavor to any situation. Since this will be your first time, you'll need to know the rules of the arena. Tyler switched back into teacher mode. The sand acts like real people, so if you injure a part of them, they will try and fight like they are real injured people. It isn't always perfect, but it's close enough. That also means that if you take the spear out of their hands, they won't just automatically create a new one. They will try to get their weapon back or fight you with bare hands. Are we clear so far? Sandy and John both nodded. The sand opponents will hit you with full force. They will try to knock you down and land a killing blow. If they think they have, the match will end and you will have lost. Obviously, they aren't really out to kill you, but you can get hurt, and you can certainly come away with bruises. Tyler paused, letting that sink in. Both of them nodded again. If they knock you down, the match isn't over. You have a chance to fight your way out of the situation and get back on your feet. Your opponents will try to land a killing blow, but failing that, they will try to bury you in sand. If they can do that, then you will have lost the match. You are welcome to use magic, of course, but I think we have to say the magic of the deep earth is off limits. This whole beach is made of sand, and I'm sure if you wanted to, you could melt it down and drown it in the ocean. This is a training exercise, and your life isn't really in danger, so let's stay away from that power. Agreed? Again, both of them nodded. I think that's it for now. You'll both have an advantage because you'll know what you're facing and where they'll start. In a real match, you won't know how many opponents you're fighting and where they begin. I think you'll still find it plenty challenging, though. House, let's run that exact same configuration again, except there will be a different challenger. This match will not count towards any ranking. It is for fun only. Sandy, do you want to go first? Oh, yes, she said. She seemed pretty excited as she was already running in place to warm up. Okay, you'll need to leave your shield charm up here, Tyler noted. If you wear it in training, you'll just drain its magic and it won't be ready for when you really need it. Sandy nodded in agreement as she took it off and handed it to Tyler. Anything else, she asked? I don't think so, he replied. Head on down the steps into the arena. You'll see a circle in the sand, and the match starts as soon as you step in. We all called out encouragement as Sandy stepped down into the arena and took a moment to warm up a little more. Then we all became quiet as she walked toward the circle. She paused, then stepped inside. The match was on. Opponents 1, 2, and 3 formed on the far side of the arena and started racing towards her. Sandy hadn't been idle either as she summoned her fire shield, expanding it to the whole width of the arena. I would have thought that this was a great idea, but the sand fighters weren't scared of fire, and there wasn't an actual force component to them. All three of them hit her shield and just barged right on through. The fire stayed with them, eating away the magic that gave them life, but it wasn't enough to actually stop them. Sandy looked like she was having an oh crap moment as she quickly summoned a baseball-sized ball of flame and shot it at one, her fastest opponent. He mostly dodged it, and it only clipped him a little, knocking him off balance. 2 and 3 weren't far behind, and they were closing in fast when Sandy shot her next fireball. 2 was ready for it, and he smoothly dropped and rolled out of the way. Meanwhile, 1 had recovered and was racing towards her again. Sandy started running away to give herself a bit more time, but the 3 of them were much faster. Realizing that wasn't working, she stopped, thrust her right hand at two, and stopped him in her tracks. Her left hand grabbed one with her power and threw him right out of the arena. It was an amazing display of magic and force, and if there'd only been two opponents, she would have been fine. But she'd forgotten about three, and he hit her like a Mack truck. We all winced at the sound of the meaty smack as he threw her several feet through the air. Before she'd even hit the ground, he'd already stabbed her with the spear. The match was technically over at that point, but he dove on her when she landed, covering her in sand. Two reached her and did the same. Sandy was now completely covered, and if the match hadn't been over before, it was now. It took a second, but Sandy clawed her way out, spitting sand and gasping for air. She definitely looked a bit worse for wear as she staggered towards the steps and climbed up to the platform. "That was a bitch," she exclaimed as she sat down into a waiting chair. Annabeth helped her get the sand out of her hair. "Good God, I haven't been hit that hard in a long time," she grimaced. "That was intense." "I'm sure you'll come up with some insights later. But for now, what did you learn from your match?" Tyler asked. He was still in teacher mode. "I've learned I'm too dependent on fire," Sandy sighed. "I should have focused on force from the very beginning. Even then, I'm still not sure I'd have won. I need to be quicker, too. A lot quicker." She turned to Annabeth. "I now have a whole new appreciation for your fight," she said. "You truly are amazing." "Aw, thank you," Annabeth said sincerely and gave her a big hug. "John, it's your turn." Tyler got us back on track. "Are you ready?" "Oh yeah, I'm ready." John sounded excited. How Sandy had fared hadn't deterred him at all. He bounded down the steps and warmed up on the arena floor. "Remember, no deep earth stuff," Tyler yelled at him. John just waved at him like, yeah, I got it. Stop bugging me." John finished warming up and stepped confidently into the circle. The match started. Once again, three spear-wielding opponents formed out of the sand and raced towards him. Gray ripples of magic started rolling over John as he reached down into the sand and came up with a baseball-sized ball of rock. I'm sure it was magic, because there shouldn't have been any rocks that size or that round anywhere on the beach. It was a signature move, though, and he wound up and threw the rock. I'd seen how powerful his throws were, and if that rock had landed, it would have taken out one of his opponents for sure. He threw it at one, though, who happened to be the fastest of the three of them. If one had done a half-assed dodge, he would have gotten hit. But he went all in. He waited till the rock had almost left John's hands, and there was no way he could change its trajectory before he made his move. Then he dodged to the side and threw himself on the ground at the same time. It was enough, and the rock just sailed on by. John looked disappointed, reached down to get another rock, and started to throw it. Two had never stopped running, as John was in the middle of his overhand throw, he jabbed at John's hand for all he was worth. It wasn't a great hit, but it was enough to deflect John's arm, and the throw missed. John swore and reached down for another rock just as three arrived and hit him hard in the side with the spear. It was a solid blow, and it rocked John a bit. It didn't knock him over or anything, but if that had been a normal person, the spear would have been real. It would have punched through his side. All three of the sandy opponents backed up, stopped, and took a knee. They didn't disappear, but it was clear they thought their hit should have ended the fight. John looked confused, then he realized what was going on. "The match is still on," he roared. "That was a solid hit, but your spear wouldn't have stopped me. You'll have to do better than that." They smoothly floated to their feet and charged him. John had a rock, and he tried to throw it again, but this time three was on his pitching side. He held his jab until John started his throw. Then he hit John's hand and knocked the rock into his own head. I was totally on John's side, but at the same time it was funny as hell, and I bit my lip to keep from snickering. I caught Annabeth's eye, and she had a twinkle in her eye too. We'd both had our fair share of what the heck moments, and all you could do is just laugh and keep going. I didn't want John or Sandy to take it wrong though, so I covered it up with a cough and kept watching. After that funny moment, the next few minutes were painful to watch. John was getting pummeled. He wasn't fast enough to get a rock off, and he wasn't fast enough to grab their spears, so they just beat the heck out of him. He tried running after him, but they were faster than him and stayed out of his reach. The gray ripples of magic on his skin were shielding him and keeping him in the fight. Still, those blows had to hurt. The match settled into a stalemate as he couldn't hurt the sand fighters and they couldn't land a killing blow. They went back and forth, waiting for someone to make a mistake, but neither side did. Finally, John tried rushing them again, and this time his opponents were ready. One swept John's leg from underneath him just as he brought it down to land his step. John went down hard and landed on his face as all three of them rushed in and piled on. John was a big guy, but the three of them had plenty of sand, and between them they covered him up completely. The match was over. John dug his way out, spluttering and digging sand out of his eyes, and then started walking towards the steps. He didn't seem upset at all. If anything, he was in fine spirits. "That was so much fun," he exclaimed when he got up with us. "Are you sure you're okay?" Tyler asked. "Some of those hits sounded painful." "Oh, I'm fine," John laughed. "A few bruises maybe, but I've been hit a lot worse than that before." "So you aren't upset?" Annabeth asked. Despite what John had said, she still looked a bit worried. "Not at all," John shook his head emphatically. I haven't been able to go all out like this in years. I think I'll start at level 1 and work my way up, just like you did. But I can't wait. This arena, actually this whole beach, is just awesome." Sandy nodded in agreement. "This place really is awesome. No wonder you both have improved so quickly. Tyler, this beach is a real gift." Tyler smiled and gave a small bow to acknowledge their praise, but he was too much of a teacher to let this moment pass. "So I'll ask you the same question I asked Sandy. What did you learn from our match?" "I'm too freaking slow," John laughed. "I'm powerful and I'm hard to hurt, but that doesn't help me at all if I can't hit back. As you saw, eventually my enemies will find a way to bring me down." He turned to Annabeth. I know you think your pow-pow sounds that let you hit harder are your greatest improvement. I personally think it's your zoom that is your best weapon. It lets you close the gap to hit when you are ready. It also lets you get away when needed. I have power in defense, but without speed, I just couldn't control the fight. Annabeth nodded thoughtfully, but I could see it both ways. If she'd only had speed, she wouldn't have had the power to take them out. I think it would be more accurate to say you need both power and speed to win a fight, and only having one or the other isn't good enough. "Jason, would you like to try this match?" Tyler asked. "Do what? Was he crazy?" "I know you like to be methodical and climb your levels one at a time, but this is an ideal situation to test yourself and see just how good your new force runes are. This won't count against your ranking, and if you lose the match, you'll be in excellent company. If you win, however, it will show just how far you've come, and also how valuable your insight into magic is." He smiled at me encouragingly as John started clapping. "Jason! Jason!" He cheered like we were at a football game and I was going for a touchdown. Annabeth and Sandy quickly joined him. "Jason! Jason!" "What you think?" I asked my analytical side. "Should I do this?" "Sure," he replied. "You might as well. After all, what's the worst that could happen? You'll take a few lumps and end up buried in sand. It won't be the first time. You've gotten wiped out many times before. On the other hand, if you win, it proves that you've doubled your power and all the searching and innovation has been worth it." "Okay," I said. "Let's do it." They cheered me on some more as I descended the stairs and warmed up again in the arena. While I did that, I thought about the fight and how to handle it. I decided to try and do exactly what Annabeth had done. I'd let 1 get in the lead and take him out first. Then I'd tackle 2 and finish up with 3. Annabeth's tactics had been perfect, and if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I stepped into the circle and the match began. I immediately realized my plan wasn't going to work. When the 3 sandy opponents materialized, they didn't rush me right away. Instead, they formed up and moved towards me as a unit. Well, crap. I guess they had learned their lesson from Annabeth's fight. They had done their best against her when they had used their spears like staffs and stayed on the defensive. I stayed calm and let them come to me. There wasn't any sense rushing over to them. Once they got within range, 2 held his spear in both hands like a staff and set himself in a defensive stance. 1 and 3 were both on the ends, and they went on the attack, jabbing at me with their spears. This was a good strategy on their part. Staying together and having 1 Sandman play defense kept me from picking them apart one at a time. The spears let them attack at a distance, though they should have been able to pick me apart. Their plan would have worked, except for one thing. I was fast. Really fast. And my magic sight made sure there was no surprises. Their spear jabs were fairly reserved at the beginning of the fight, but when they couldn't land a hit, they got wilder and wilder. Finally, 3 gave a thrust that was way overextended, and I just grabbed his spear and pulled it right out of his hand. I was shocked it had worked. The weapon was made of sand after all, so I thought maybe it would just fall apart once 3 wasn't holding it anymore. Once I realized it would stay together, I quickly turned, ran to the wall, and threw it over. A spear was now out of the fight. My opponents changed their strategy a tiny bit as they now put 3 in the center. He didn't have a spear, but he could still play defense. 2 switched to the outside, and again they tried to jab. We danced for a bit, and again their jabs got a bit wild. I was pretty sure they were trying to bait me though, and I decided to use that to my advantage. I waited until 1 gave a wild thrust and grabbed his spear, like I was going to try and pull it away from him too. He was ready for me, and he pulled it back as hard as he could. I kept my grip on the spear and sprinted towards him, using his own pull to help close the distance. It worked perfectly, as I closed with him before he knew what was happening. 1 was off balance and wide open as I summoned the lightning. I did a little pow 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 of my own, and my new attack rune blew him apart. That left me in the perfect position to take care of 3, who was blocking 2 from using his spear. 3 tried to cover up and play defense, but I just attacked his arms. 2 tried to get around 3 to join in the fight, but I easily pigeon-stepped to keep 3 between us and kept hitting 3. Blah, blah, blah. 2 tried to get around 3 to join the fight, but I easily pigeon-stepped to keep 3 between us and kept hitting. 3 was the toughest of the bunch, but he soon fell apart also. That just left me with 2, and he didn't stand a chance. I knocked his spear out of position and closed with him and punched him out. The whole attack had taken a few seconds, and just like that, the match was over. I realized my housemates were cheering for me, so I turned and gave them a happy wave. This whole match had gone a lot better than I'd expected. The new opponents were tougher, but I punched a lot harder now, so it balanced out. They were certainly faster, but it still wasn't anything I couldn't handle. This fully healed body I had was just freaking fantastic. It was incredibly fast, very strong, and capable at going at 100% for as long as I needed. I might not be big like John or sex on wheels like Tyler, but I was falling in love with my own skin. T and his grove had given me an amazing gift, and I was ever so grateful. I thought I'd have to lean on my shield to protect me, but they hadn't tagged me once. That was awesome. I was still full of excitement and energy from the match, so I ran over to the stairs and sprinted up to the lounge. John was still sitting back chilling, and he gave me another congratulatory swat on the butt. I got hugs from Annabeth and Sandy, and a saucy kiss from Tyler. I had to break that off quickly as I was starting to feel excited in a whole new way. These gray shorts were wonderful for working out, but they were terrible at holding back the one-eyed monster when it was ready to rumble. I was a little afraid that Annabeth might be upset that I'd stolen a bit of her thunder, but she was just happy for me and thrilled that I'd beaten the arena as well. I was very lucky to have such a good friend like her. "And now there's only one person here that hasn't run the scenario yet," Jason said, cocking an eye at Tyler. "How about you show it how it's really done?" Tyler agreed and headed down to the arena. I was really curious to see him fight again. He'd already shown Annabeth and me what he could do, and he'd certainly been amazing, but it had been right at the beginning of our training. We hadn't even learned how to properly punch or move yet, so everything he'd done had seemed mysterious and awesome. I had a lot more experience now, both in the arena and in real life, so I wanted to see just how good I thought he was now. Would he still seem that amazing? The answer was an emphatic yes. Tyler really was that awesome. He made his opponents look like they were soft marshmallows and just as slow. He stepped into the circle, started the match, and then ran towards them. He didn't give them time to form a strategy as he approached three, floated around his defense, and blew him apart with one punch. Two jabbed him with the spear, but Tyler easily deflected it, closed the distance, and took him out with one shot too. That only left one, the fastest of the bunch. He tried to play defense, but that worked as well as it had with three, and one punch later, he fell into a pile of sand. I shared a glance with Annabeth. She looked just as impressed with our teacher as I was. "Well, damn," John said. "That was embarrassingly easy. I thought he'd at least make it look a little harder. I feel like a wuss now." I guess we're going to have to be wusses together," Sandy said wryly. "I didn't do any better than you did. Well, at least we know we have work to do." "We sure do," he gave her a saucy wink. "I need to work on being harder, and maybe thrusting a little faster." He made a punching motion in the air like he was talking about battle, but we all got the double entendre. Sandy looked like she wanted to say something totally naughty and totally inappropriate, but Annabeth and I were standing right there looking at both of them, so she swallowed whatever she was going to say and just gave him a pat on the shoulder instead. John smirked like he'd made a point in whatever private game they played and gave her a pat on the butt right back. "Behave, mountain man," Sandy commanded, and the tone of her voice said this was all going down in her book of remembrance, and she was going to exact her revenge at a more appropriate moment. He answered her laugh. His answering laugh said that he would love every minute of it. Annabeth gave me a look like newlyweds. You can't let them out of the bedroom and expect them to behave. I just shrugged back like, love's gotta do what love's gotta do. Tyler joined us and we gave him a round of applause and congratulated him on his stunning victory. He bowed, thanked us, and then suggested it was time that John and Sandy really learned how to move. The three of them moved back up the beach and their training started. Annabeth and I stayed and alternated rounds in the arena. I went back to my normal level of 31 and started working my way up from there. The matches now felt incredibly easy, but I was okay with that. They would feel harder soon enough, and right now I wanted to continue celebrating just how far I'd come. The sun started to set, and we all decided to call it a night. Sandy had gone to the grocery, and her pantry was partially restocked. She said she wanted to cook for us, and we all thought it was a wonderful idea. Sandy's cooking was not to be missed. Bermuda and Mr. Tubbles joined us, and they had a bit of dirt and a couple leaves on them. I think they'd been playing up in the trees away from the beach. Eggy was still sitting in his mound of sand, enjoying the sun and the view. As soon as I touched him, though, I knew something was up. He had an intensity and an intention about him. "My source," he said gravely, "it is time." And this ends our Sunday reading. And next week we will have Eggy's time. All right. I'll see you guys then.